legitimate methods for immortality, like soft immortality and hard immortality, which I'll explain a little bit. Soft immortality is like stops aging or slows aging and heals quick, and hard immortality would be like almost instant healing, like you see in like movies and stuff, like Wolverine kind of. So let's kick it off.
Okay, in the system in present usage, what we have here is two plates with concentric rings, such as you see in this situation here, even though the geometry is a little different. And these all add up to form what's a capacitor plate. Basically, you have a surface here, and if you apply an electric charge to any point on this, the whole thing builds up a static field around it. And often you'll get sparks jumping between the plates as the thing tries to equalize its potential out and become to one static electric potential. So this is hooked to a Tesla transformer, which is often grounded to one side. And what you have here is you have a space in between these two antennas that becomes altered by the high voltage, high frequency output of the Tesla transformer. So what this reduces to is basically is you have two plates of a capacitor driven by a high frequency or impulse current generator, which produces a current in this space. The intensity of this current is directly proportional to the amount of lines of electric force that are produced by this coil, which is often called the voltage, and the time rate at which this is charged and discharged by the sudden reversals of electric potential produced by the coil. So inside this you basically have a modified space here consisting of a kind of ether shock waves. Now I found that if you take and put a spark gap across this, that this space then discharges in nanoseconds, and you produce a kind of explosive action in this space. In other words, you have electric lines of induction which form a type of compression inside the space, which is often wrongly called a scalar field. In actuality, what it is, it's a static longitudinal field. So you can kind of view it like as a tank or cylinder filled with compressed gas. And when you put a spark gap across this, then this pressure is suddenly relieved, and all of this force explodes outwards faster than the velocity of light against the bounding structures. We've had people, indicate they felt rather profound experiences inside this space, and it'll be interesting to experiment and see exactly what kind of effect this has as far as with relation to, mind states and diseases and what have you. And what Lukoski was actually doing, however, was he was, rather than feeding this thing straight in with a field of electrical flux supplied along a conductor from a Tesla transformer, he was feeding the thing like this and supplying electric current around the loop, which is exactly 90 degrees from the other system. Okay, basically what you have here is you take your capacitor, which you normally discharge into the Tesla coil, and discharge it straight into this loop, and it produces what's called an oscillating circuit. And basically, if you take the coefficient or the degree at which this loop can store magnetic energy through the lines of force that surround it, and the degree of which the capacitor can store dielectric energy by the lines of force that stand between it, and that gives you the basic period of oscillation, which produces the familiar electric waveform we call a sine wave. Now, of course, losses and radiation eat this up, so in actuality you get a wave that dampens out and disappears, which is called an electric oscillation. So what Lukoski did was put a resonant structure inside of this loop to be excited by the electromagnetic field and longitudinal field and scalar fields produced by this loop, each one of these having its own little capacitor and serving as an oscillating circuit. Now the theory was here is each one of these oscillators would oscillate at a different frequency, and if you had enough of these loops, you would produce all the frequencies required to resonate to the individual oscillating circuits inside the body. So you start off with a long wavelength or a low frequency and work your way up, so you produce what's called a harmonic spectrum. So if you looked at this on a graph where you had, let's say, rate or frequency, rate of oscillation going this way, and intensity going this way, it produces a series of oscillations which keep on going on and on forever. But of course the amplitude drops by some function similar to an exponential function with respect to distance, and also the fact that you have kind of a raucous random
I know this is getting really technical, but it'll make sense in a little bit.
pattern in the spark gap here. These things broaden out to produce kind of an envelope, electrical energy. So if you have, let's say, a plot of the cells in your body and they resonate at these various frequencies, then if you feed them a spectrum of energy, then each one will pick its own characteristic frequency out of that spectrum of energy and oscillate, and Lukoski felt this oscillation would power the cell back up and bring it back to life. With the ratios of patterns involved here, Normally you have, we have a regular log periodic antenna, one that's not logarithmic?
No.
Okay, what we've done here is there's a specific ratio involved in life called the golden ratio. Now, as an example of this, if I take the length from my shoulder to my arm and compare that from the length of my shoulder to my wrist, and then the length from that to the beginning of my fingers, and then the length to the first knuckle, and the length to the second knuckle, and the length so on down the line right to the tip, then we end up with a series which is similar to the harmonic pattern of the first coil I showed you, where each one of these is basically 60% of the one that preceded it. It's what's called the golden ratio. Now you find this pattern like in leaves and plants, where if you have a leaf, the vein structure always goes along with this ratio, and it produces a specific geometric angle, 36 degrees. And then there's another angle involved here of 108 degrees, and all these basically come up to be what's called the golden ratio, which you take a circle, divide it into 5 parts, and that gives you your various angles, and you have to split them to get to 36 degrees. But each one of these is twice 36, or 72 degrees. So what we've done is taken these patterns and applied them to what's called log periodic antenna theory. Now, your regular television antenna that you used to have years ago was built like kind of like a leaf of a plant. It had a guiding structure, and then you had elements come off of this, which are usually in kind of a crazy, distorted pattern. They appeared to have no real logic to it. Actually, it's based on a very complicated system of correction factors to give you a response that you want. So this thing will respond to the broadband television signals the same way like you're trying to get a group of cells to respond to a broadband spectrum. In other words, you want a whole bunch of frequencies or wavelengths to be able to be picked up by this thing, because normally an antenna, simple antenna, responds only to one frequency that's determined by the standing wave energy that's produced on that antenna. It was found in around the 50s into the 60s that the need developed for extremely wide bandwidth or wide frequency response antennas to deal with these new radar pulses that had spectra that went way out, way into the microwave range and covered, many octaves of frequency. So what they did is they took this, and rather than going through all this effort of correction factors, which really didn't work anyway, is they found that you just put these in simple logarithmic proportion, and for some reason which couldn't really be explained, that the antenna would just respond evenly to all frequencies. And what was interesting is a virtual antenna appeared out about maybe 1.5 times farther. So the antenna was synthesizing an antenna in the space beyond it. So we've taken these theories, the theory of the organic patterning of life, which is based on these log periodic ratios, and applied it to antenna theory, which is logarithmic in form.
All right, so basically what he's saying is that coil is based on the golden ratio, which is what logarithm is. It's based on the golden ratio, where you can't have, it all has to equal to 1. Because golden ratio is actually 1, not 1.618, whatever. It's 1. So if you have 3 divided by 2, it's 1. 7 divided by 5, 1. 7 divided by 6, 1. 7 divided by 4, 1 equals 1. And he based the coil like that. And when you do it in the golden ratio at all those different sizes of the coil, those different rings here, then you can hit every single cell in the body, the frequency of every single cell in the body. And he goes on to say, like this video is from 1986, U.S. Psychotronics. Yeah, Thomas Joseph Brown, I think his name is, and Bob Beck, who's a doctor. Bob Beck goes into how they used this. They had 2 coils connected to this Tesla transformer, which is the key to the whole thing. The key is not the coil, it's the Tesla transformer. But anyway, they would put someone in between these 2 coils for like a half hour a day for like a couple weeks, and it cured everything, every cancer, every disease, every ailment, everything. All of it was cured. It cured people so well that like cancer patients would get depressed that they were cured because they were like getting used to being a victim, I guess. And like it worked like it worked every single time. My icon is actually based on it, kind of. So then you take into account of that. What the only issue with that the Cosby multi-wave oscillating coil is you have to sit in between the coils, physically sit in between them. Well, not if you use crystals and blood. And here's proof. So, here's a little clip from crystal video. It's actually pretty hard to find. I've said this before in my piezoelectric crystal live stream. It's actually pretty hard to find information on crystals. This guy has like some of the best information, and it's from like the like 70s. Anyway, I'll play a little part of it.
Exactly. It's not just a piece of quartz. We have some crystals here now that I'll be talking about later on, and they're beautiful. But what good are they? I'm sure that a lot of you have used them for many things, maybe your arthritis or something, but did you know what you're doing? We have to take a look at what tools we're using, where we're using them, do we use them separately or in conjunction with each other? We have to know exactly what we are using.
I'm not going to go more into this video because I couldn't find the actual part where he talks about it, but he mentions how like you can charge crystals with your like intent, basically. So you can give it a love, like you can match the crystal to your body, to yourself. And that brings me to this. This is a clip about Ruth Drown, and she made a device that could. She used blood, the blood of someone, to heal people where space didn't matter, where they were located didn't matter. So she could be in California, and the other patient could be in London, and if she used her device on that patient's blood in California, the patient would heal in London. So space was not an issue. There was no spatial aspect. So she was like, it was like instantaneous across thousands of miles. And I mean, I could play the video, but it's kind of old, and I don't know the exact part where they start talking about it. But this is Ruth Drown. I have the video on my channel. It's Borderland Science. This is Thomas Joseph Brown and Peter Lindenberg. They made this video back in the day, back when Eric Dollard. That last video had Eric Dollard in, with not with white hair, which is like seeing Doc Brown without white hair. I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, that's basically what they talk about in this video. But anyway, so if you had that device, that the Cosby multi-wave oscillating coil with a Tesla transformer, and a Tesla transformer works like the best I can explain it. You can read about it in Jerry Vasilato's Lost Science book, which you can find on archive.org. Chapter 4, he goes into what Tesla, when he learned about this certain type of electricity, and Eric Dollard goes into it in Condensed Intro to Tesla Transformers, which is like it's kind of more technical aspect to it, and he kind of simplifies a lot of electrical engineering in that paper. Also, this is not free. This shouldn't be on this website. You're supposed to pay for that, but whatever. The way it works, the way I think I can explain it the best is, you know how when you turn on your light, in like your light switch in your room or whatever, and if you turn it on real fast, like up down up down up down real quick, it either blows out the light or it starts a fire. Like I wouldn't recommend trying it, but you'll blow out your light if you do it like really fast. Like, but that's that. It's about this first little jump of voltage that it reaches like infinite levels, but it's only for like a tenth of a second, and then after that it goes back to normal voltage. It's like the spark of life almost. That's what it basically is. So Tesla, Jerry Vasilato's talks about it in Lost Science. Tesla learned about this little like instantaneous. It's not instantaneous. Like this huge spike in voltage that happens right when you turn the device on. So he made a device that could turn on and off really fast, and he found that he could like amplify the voltage to almost infinite levels, and it would like disintegrate his wires and stuff. But he couldn't like shield himself. He said it felt like prickly needles on him, like prickly goosebumps kind of. And it would go past. He would have like being like a Faraday cage, or he would put like a glass shield in front of him, but it would go through the glass and the Faraday cage. and still give him like prickly needles when he was using the device. It was some kind of dynamo. I mean, yeah, I don't really actually remember exactly what he called it, but that's basically what happens when you turn the light switch on and off real quick. So that's what the Tesla transformer is. It doesn't really transform; it amplifies the ether. That's what it does. It amplifies the ether. And dollar is it's not like a Tesla coil. Tesla coil is a completely different thing. Tesla transformer amplifies the ether. It's like, in really simplified terms, it's turning a light switch on and off real quick, and it's harnessing that jump of electricity. And then it goes to the coils, which are in a golden ratio, so that when the energy goes from one coil to the other, and you're sitting in between it, it hits every single cell's frequency, and it charges every single cell in the body. And then you put a crystal, which you can like charge with your energy, with your Les Brown. I couldn't find the actual part where he talks about it, but you can like the crystal. He says the part that I showed you, crystals are living beings. That's basically what he says, and you can like charge yourself to the crystal, and then you put blood there, which is what Ruth Drown was using. Blood, which can heal someone irregardless of their location. So if you put a crystal with your blood in the middle of that device and always had that device on, it's like soft immortality, basically. You would always be fully charged cells. The cells wouldn't die. So immortality. And that's what my icon is. Except for I kind of rotate it. But that's the first method for legitimate immortality. And I think it would 100% work. You can actually buy the Cosby multi-wave oscillating coil with the Tesla transformer from Brill.io, and it's made by Eric Dollar. And I actually emailed him a couple weeks ago. It's like $9,000. But the next method is my man Kent Hovind. If you don't know who Kent Hovind is, a creationist that used to debate. He still does, but he used to go into these debates with evolution people, evolutionists, and he would like stomp them, absolutely destroy them. I remember watching it when I was like, I don't know, eighth grade, in like 2003 or something. And I remember like watching. I was like, oh, this guy's gonna get killed. He's gonna get his ass beat. After like watching the whole thing, I was like, you know what? The guy makes some good points, and he makes great points. Like almost everything he says is now like truthers are just like starting to get into now, like with our history and how petrification works and all that stuff. He was talking about all this back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and no one else was. Only him. I mean, he relates it all to the Bible, which I think he's a little off by, but everything else he says is like spot on. But here he is talking about oxygen, and there's a reason why I'm showing this clip.
Pressure and increasing oxygen does some neat things to your bloodstream. Your blood has little red blood cells in there that carry oxygen. When it's oxygenated, it turns red and it goes through the lungs and picks up oxygen. And then the mechanism of how the body absorbs oxygen and releases oxygen is absolutely amazing. That would take billions of years to evolve, of course. And before it evolved, nobody lived. They all died while they were trying to evolve this complex oxygen transport system. But the oxygen, the red blood cells have a maximum carrying capacity. They can only hold so much. One of the problems with sickle cell anemia, which is a disease that only black people get, the red blood cell, instead of being shaped like a donut, it caves in, so it looks like a sickle, like a part of a moon, a crescent moon. Now you have much less surface area, so it holds less oxygen. So a person with sickle cell is very likely to have a very difficult time breathing, or at least carrying oxygen to the body. And it's very often fatal, people with sickle cell. We had a girl, you don't remember her, Eric, you were too small, but a girl rode our bus in Illinois, in Kankakee. Her mother and her father were brother and sister. Her mother was 9 when she was born. Her father was 10. It was her incest. Okay. Well, she had sickle cell anemia. She rode our bus. Sweet, godly girl. Loved the little. She lived to be 13 years old and died. She was sick a lot during those 13 years and finally died at age 13. Sickle cell is where the blood cell collapses and it won't carry enough oxygen. But if you get enough pressure, not only will your hemoglobin and red blood cells carry oxygen, your plasma actually absorbs oxygen. Now, plasma is the juice that your blood is, the liquid part of the blood, not the solid part like the platelets and the red blood cells and white blood cells. It's the liquid part. You can donate plasma. Anybody done that before? Donate plasma?
Basically, he's saying when there's more oxygen, the pressure is higher, the blood cells hold more oxygen. And this is recent, but the Times of Israel. Israeli scientist claims to reverse aging in blood cells. Now, aging comes down to these things called telomeres, and how like they're how long they are, I guess. From what I understand, I haven't looked into telomeres in a while, but basically they figured out that when they use hyperbaric oxygen therapy, it increases the telomere length and decreases the immunosenescence. I don't know what that is, but it increases the telomere length. It actually reverses aging because of the telomere length. Like people were always trying to stop the degrading of the telomere length. This increases the telomere length because of the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So high pressure, put someone in a high pressure chamber with increased oxygen, like a air compression, basically. And it's all based on pressure. What I've been saying about pressure, how magic is everything works on pressure differences at create a vacuum that has to close to the path of least resistance, and in this case, the telomeres grow, they reverse. So you can actually reverse aging according to this theory. And I mean, it's kind of like the movie Deadpool. You know how Deadpool he gets like tortured in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, high pressure oxygen with low oxygen, something like that, and he turns immortal because of it. He becomes immortal. That's what this is. If you can reverse aging, you're technically immortal, right? This is kind of like it's like a little bit better than soft immortality by my definition. It's like in the middle between hard immortality and soft. I would consider hard immortality like Deadpool. Like you can get your arm blown off and it'll grow back. But there's nothing. I don't think there's anything. I have some speculation about how that could work, but I don't think there's anything that official that could work like that currently. I have some ideas, but here's more of the papers. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy increases telomere length and decreases the blah 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 in isolated blood cells. And then Ken Hovind actually goes into doing this with people that would do this with plants, and the plants would grow like 1,000 times bigger, something crazy like that. Like this guy in Japan, he put a tomato plant, one single tomato plant, in a room with only certain types of light allowed in.
A guy named Kei Mori, Keio University in Tokyo, started raising tomato plants. All he did was filter the sunlight so that the light was not giving any ultraviolet or any X-ray, just pure light. He did not pressurize the air. He did not give it increased CO2, just simply filtered sunlight. His tomato plant grew 16 feet tall and produced 900 tomatoes on one plant. It kept growing and growing. They moved it to a shopping center, built scaffolding to hold up the branches. They said this thing might produce 10,000 tomatoes. Well, the last I heard, it actually produced 15,000 tomatoes and grew 40 feet tall, a tomato tree. Now his tomatoes, they were cherry tomatoes, but they came off baseball size. That was just filtered sunlight. Had he increased air pressure and more CO2, no telling what it would do.
And it was one tomato plant. So imagine if it was a human. Imagine if there was a different. Ken Hovind goes into it. Jay Dreamers goes into it. All the archaics, they all talk about like a vapor canopy, but that's basically how it would work. A vapor canopy would be a different pressure of oxygen, and more oxygen or less oxygen, but more pressure. The other method is the philosopher's stone, but there's so much like gravel into this that I don't know anyone that actually knows how to do it. And I think that anyone says that they know how to do it isn't doing it. From what I've seen, from the people I've watched, the alchemists I've heard of. Some people say it's a gem, like Fortune Saint Germain says it's a giant red diamond. Maybe, but I don't think it's that. Then there's like, you see alchemy books where like Abraham was really like 1,000 years old because he kept using the philosopher's stone to reduce his aging. Excuse me. And I've even found like stuff where I can't find it now, but it's on this sacred text site and it's about one of these articles. I think it was might have been no, it wasn't this one. It was one of these, but they tell a story about some guy that was like uh, looked like he was 120 years old, and they claim that he was 200 years old, and he was an alchemist, and like they had entire companies of Scythian soldiers chasing him through like the city one time, and the guy was running like he was 20, and he looked like he was like 120, and but they claimed that he was in the 200s because he was an alchemist and they used philosopher's stone. That's kind of immortality, right? So figuring this out, which good luck. If I had to guess, I think it has something to do with I don't know. It has something to do with petrification. Petrification ties all this shit together, I think. I've tried a bunch of experiments with petrification. I tried because Ken Hovind talks about petrification, how kids would find petrified, like an acorn that was petrified because he left it in a bucket.
This kid in the picture here sent me these petrified acorns. He's 7 years old. He said, Brother Hovind, I put the acorns in a bucket of water, hoping they would sprout, and I forgot about them. A year later, when Mama found them on the back porch, they had turned to stone in a bucket of water. Petrified acorns.
That would fill with water when it rained, I guess. Fill with snow when it snowed, and then evaporate, and then the heat would come down and dry it, and then it would get cold, and then it would get hot and cold, hot. You know what I mean? I think it has something to do with that. Like, so I mean, pressure does actually. But I've even called. There's an example of someone that there was an experiment in 2005 by the Pacific Northwest Laboratory by Yang Soon Shin. I called Yang Soon Shin, and even like talked to him about it, where they took a piece of wood and they put it into a chamber of argon gas and then increased the temperature to 2,000 degrees Celsius, which is like that's really high, and because it had to be argon gas, because if it was oxygen, then the wood would burn, but with argon it wouldn't burn. So it just solidified. And at first they soaked it in a weak acid, and then they soaked the piece of wood in a salt brine. So my theory was if you soak wood in like a brine, salt brine, or like a rust brine or something like that, and then desiccated it would turn solid. That's what I got from that Yang Soon Sin thing. But I tried that. It didn't work. The wood remained the same. I mean, I put a piece of wood in mud, and then in like a box, and then I put like six of those demoisturizers that you put like for kitty litter and shit. I put that in there, and I left it there for like months, and it didn't turn rock. But the whole everything was dried out, but the wood didn't turn to rock, even though I soaked it in a brine before that too. And then I've also tried doing it with microwave, because a microwave could provide that heat, that like pressure to make it turn to stone. So I would soak it in a brine, put the piece of wood in the microwave, and then put it in for like a minute. And then as soon as the smoke started coming from the wood, I would take it out and put it into a jar and close off the jar. And I did this like 20 times, and it was like pitch black. It was turning into charcoal basically, which I don't think is what is meant by petrification. Even though technically coal is a rock, but so I guess it kind of worked, but I don't know. But then there's high voltage. You can do it with high voltage. It's all a pressure thing, I think. I'm realizing this now. Like when Yang Soon Shin did it, they had a high pressure from temperature. When I did it with the microwave, it's a high pressure from there's microwaves. If you do it with high voltage, it's the high pressure from the high voltage, right? It's all pressure. And then you need to have it soaked in that salt, so the salt can get inside the pores of the wood, and then it hardens. I think it has something to do with that. And I think that what happens with the Philosopher's Stone is they do something like that, but they do it over a long period. They're solidifying something's essence. And essence just means this distillation of something. You distill you distill wood, like you burn it and then you collect the smoke and then condense the smoke into liquid. It'll make methane. I'm pretty sure it's methane. Or it can also make turpentine. I don't know. I think it has something to do with distillation. I think alchemy is all based on this. It's all distillation. The properties of distillation. It's not more complicated than that, I don't think. Anyway, that would be the third method. And then you got the rice test. Now this is kind of speculatory, I guess, but everyone knows about the rice test, right? Do one container of rice where you say I love you, and another container of rice where you say I hate you for a month. And at the end, the rice with the love is still almost edible, and the rice with the hate has all kinds of mold, right? Well, I think this is how some saints could live so long. They were doing that with themselves, basically. They didn't eat anything. It was just love, like a loving energy they would radiate. And I think this has to do with someone's authority as well. Like, I think think about it, if like Marcus Aurelius did the rice test, I think it would work in like a day compared to like a normal person doing it, because he was like a closest thing I can think of like an actual sovereign man, living man that actually existed, or like Jesus did. You know what I mean? Like your authority. When I say authority, I mean your spiritual authority, not like authority like the police or something. I think that has a big thing to do with it. So when you raise your spiritual authority, you can affect reality more so, where you could become immortal, like the saints would, like Saint Germain supposedly was. I actually think Fortune Saint Germain might actually be Saint Germain, but whatever. But yeah, that's all I had on immortality. There's just 3 or 4 methods. The first one I think is spot on, 100% work every time. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's some ways to become immortal. I don't really like when people seek immortality. I think that's weak because we're already spiritually immortal. So if you're seeking immortality, then you're going about it the wrong way. But what I'm talking about is physical immortality, which I still think is weak, but it also happens to be my icon. But I mean, it would be helpful to heal friends and family with it, right? But yeah, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it.